What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. New video. Yesterday I did a video on an old cellmate I had by the name of Kong, right? And in the video I talked about how Kong wound up whacking a dude that was from a different race. And I didn't go into the specifics, and then I got this comment here from Andre the Great. And Andre the Great, you see, he says, wouldn't that have kicked off a riot, right? When you're hitting another race. And I'm sure other people wondered that, and that's the reason why I'm going to do this video. And we're going to get a little bit into it, okay? So the vast majority of times when one group in California, that's why the politics are the way they are, right? When someone from one faction hits someone from another faction, hits another race, the vast majority of the times, the yard is going down. It's going to be on, right? However, there are times when things are different, and it's usually only between these two groups. Okay, so what wound up happening was this. I've talked about it before, but I'm going to talk about it more here. And we're going to get into more detail. So Kong had been up in the shoe, and the guy he wound up whacking was in the same pod with him in Pelican Bay shoe. It was a white guy, right? Now, something occurred in the pod, and the white guy said something that one of the legends didn't appreciate. And that's something that a lot of people, I don't think they know, unless you've been to the joint in California. You could do something in the shoe and offend the wrong person and not know it. But you find out once you leave the shoe, and you find out in a harsh way. So, like I said yesterday, Kong was out there on the yard, and he saw the white guy, right? And now I want to make sure I say this. I was in the hole already when this happened, but Kong being my Sally, and me being in a leadership position in the hole when he got back there, I saw his lockup order, and then as my Sally, he's running me down everything, right? And when he saw the guy, he knew this dude's got to go. And like Kong said, he was old school. He could have easily, he's an older homie, he just got out the shoe not too long ago. He could have easily went to the llavero, the guy running the yard, and said, hey man, this dude just came, he got to go, this is who he offended, whoop, 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 give him the whole rundown. It would have been handled like that. But Kong, he told me, listen, I grew up amongst them dudes. Like I came in when, I was around these guys. I know these guys personally. They know me personally. And he said he would have felt a certain way had he not handled it himself. So at the time, this is what I didn't mention. And, and it tripped me out because there's a certain guy that hates me on YouTube, right? Based on there's a white guy in New Folsom named Kenny. I'm not going to say the whole name. And Kenny at one time was a legend for the whites. And he flipped on them. And during this time, he was on B Yard in New Folsom, right? And the Southerners had been telling the whites, like, hey man, what's up with this dude? And they were like, no, he's a sleeper, this. And they were making excuses for him, right? And so at that time, B Yard in New Folsom, the whites were considered by other whites in other facilities and institutions. The whites on B Yard were considered no good. Now, that was their politics. They weren't rats. They didn't have bad charges, but they didn't hit this dude. Now, it isn't the responsibility of any other faction to move on that guy based on their politics. That's their business to handle. However, this is what wound up happening. Kong whacks the dude that he was in the shoe with, right? Boom, 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 boom. That guy makes it back to his cell. He gets away, gets into his cell, patches himself up as good as he can. In between yards, one of the whites gets at who he has to get out as far as the Southerners and says, look, man, the dude, he knows why it happened. You know, he thought he ironed it out. He knows why it happened. He doesn't want to retaliate on none of you guys. But if you guys will let him, because he was already, as soon as he comes out of the cell, he was going to get got, right? But this white dude, this Wood, gets at that, you know, who he had to get at and says, look, if you guys let him back out on the yard, he's going to rush Kenny. We're going to use him to get rid of Kenny and finally get that headache out of here. So when the homie that had the spot heard that, he's, hell yeah, get both of them out of here, right? So he tells him, we're going to let him come out. If he touches, even steps towards any of the Southerners, we're moving on all you guys. And the Wood told him, nah, that's my word. He's coming out here just to get Kenny so he can get his medical attention. He's hit pretty good. He needs medical attention. So the homie tells everybody, hey, be on your toes, but this is the plan that they have. Okay, cool. And this is how Kong wound up getting caught. Kong got away with it. So Yard comes out, and sure enough, the white guy goes and moves on Kenny. Unfortunately for him, Kenny was known to be pretty major with his hands. Kenny didn't get to the position he once held for being a dummy. When the white dude went towards him, Kenny pretty much figured out what it was, and it was pretty bad. However, what happened was this. The guy that had got hit first yard, this is second yard when everything went down, same day. The guy that had got whacked first yard, what he did was he wrapped himself, he cut up sheets and had his cellie wrap him tight so you couldn't see the blood coming out, right? After the incident with Kenny, they put Kenny in the cage and they put the other guy in the cage, right? When you get put in the cage, you're standing there for a while and then they pull you out. I believe the form was called a 7219. That's the form they'll have you take your shirt off, and before you go to the hole, they have to do the reports and they want to make sure there's no injuries. So they pulled Kenny out first, did his, boom. Then they pulled out the guy that moved on him, right? When he took his shirt off, he's wrapped up and the blood is, you know, seeping. You can see the blood. So Kenny had got initially put in the cage for, I don't know what the reason was. I can't remember. But when they saw the holes in the other guy, they told him, yeah, you just caught an attempted murder. And Kenny immediately said that he didn't do it. He said, you got to go get that Mexican dude named Kong. No shame in his game, man. That's how Kong wound up getting busted. Now, back to what I was initially saying, though. Southerners and whites, unfortunately, they get into more of these type of incidents because they deal with each other the most. As far as, like, you know, I'm just going to say, as far as the dope game, for different reasons within the dope game, there's more friction. But normally, now I'll tell you this. During that time, the whites on C facility were going at it with the Northerners. Those were considered, like, if it would have happened on that yard, those guys would have got off. Being that The whites on B facility at that time, 1996 in New Folsom, being that they knew they had the problem because Kenny was on that yard, they didn't want to go to other places. They needed to fix what was wrong with where they were, right? Had they not had Kenny there, had they not had, had they not been put on notice that their legends were upset with them, more than likely, when Kong moved on the guy, it would have went up. Like, yard would have went down. It would have been ugly. So to me, that was the main reason why there was no retaliation, and the yard didn't erupt into a riot. And some people maybe think like, how is it? And I'm gonna give you an example. In High Desert, there was a group referred to as the New Flowers. Now, according to all Northerners, the New Flowers were no good, but they were functioning on the yard with all the active whites, Southerners, blacks, etc. Because that was Northern politics. That's why I trip out when I hear that one dude that hates me so much. The Southerners don't, their program isn't dictated by any other factions politics. Ever. Never have been, never will be. So, I just wanted to clarify that and let you guys know that we're wondering, like, how come they didn't jump off? It was because the whites at the time needed to fix the problem. This was their opportunity to fix that problem. And then so the second time I went to New Folsom, the roles had reversed. The whites on C Yard, again, they didn't have bad cases and they weren't rats or whatever, but something happened to where now, when I went the second time to New Folsom, the whites on B Yard were handling their business. The whites on C Yard weren't. They were more into getting high. They were letting shit, they should have taken care of. They're letting it pass, But I can tell you right now, there were a lot of good dudes over there that were white dudes. I used to do a lot of business with them. But for whatever reason, their politics, that yard was looked at as funny. Then, see, we used to be like, again, it was nobody else's business but that group's business. But you're aware of it, right? But then white dudes would get off on B Yard and then land on C Yard, and then they would program with them. And these are dudes that got off on B Yard, so it was weird. But again, I did decades in prison, and I don't ever try to act like I know the blacks, different black factions, their politics, the whites' politics, the Northerners' politics, the bulldog. No, you get a superficial understanding. You understand somewhat, but the inner workings, the inner details, all that type of stuff, that's nobody's business but theirs, and nobody gives a damn, right? If you ain't under those politics, why worry about them? Anyways, that's my video for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Everybody, please be safe, be smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them, man. I'm out of here.